Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Public cloud doesn't make you do backups. Why does your private cloud? Today's webinar is sponsored by Datrium and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator on today's special event. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to today's presenters. First off, on the event today, I'm excited to introduce Mr. Tushar Agrawal. He is the Director of Product Management at Datrium. And we're also excited to be joined by Mr. Russ Fellows, who is a senior partner and analyst at the Evaluator Group. Tushar, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, my pleasure. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tushar, and I'm a product management person at Datrium. And we're super excited to be here and share some of our content and kind of get your feedback on it. So thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for being on. And Russ, what's your background?
Well, thanks, David. Yes, so I've been in IT for, well, I've lost count of the number of years now, over 25. And I've had quite a few different roles. I've been an IT system administrator, a test engineer. I've worked in product marketing and product management. And I've been an analyst in the storage space now for about the last 12 years.
Very nice. Well, thanks for being on the event today, Russ. So before we jump into it, before I hand it over to Tushar, just a few things that you should know about today's event. We want this to be a very educational event, so we encourage any and all questions. Use the GoToWebinar control panel. We have experts standing by to answer your questions. We'll be having a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event to cover some of the best questions that come in greater detail. So keep those questions coming in, and we'll be answering them throughout the event. Second, I want to point out that we have a handout section there in your GoToWebinar control panel. There are two handouts available for download. The first one is the economic validated design about the Datrium DVX solution. So make sure you check out that Datrium DVX product brief, and also check out the white paper that's being discussed on today's webinar from the Evaluator Group that covers the Datrium DVX solution. You can download both of those PDFs there in your GoToWebinar control panel and share them with your friends and colleagues. And then finally, some of you may have heard that we're giving away a $300 Amazon gift card on today's event. We'll be awarding one lucky prize winner on the live event at the end of the webinar. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. If you are the winner of that gift card, you can optionally donate the prize value to one of our selected charities. Through these events, Actual Tech Media has donated thousands of dollars to charity, so we welcome any such donations in advance and appreciate you doing so. And I should point out that the official legal prize terms and conditions of today's drawing can be found at actualtechmedia.com. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions there. And with that, I'm excited to get going on today's event. I'm going to hand it over now to Tushar. Take it away.
Thanks, David. Thanks, David. So welcome, everyone, once again, and super excited to share this content with you. So let's jump right into it. So, as you all know, we live in an increasingly faster economy, right? We live in what we like to call in Datrium, we live in an instant economy, right? And what that means is that the expectations that customers have, that your partners have, that your end users have, is increasing by the day, and everybody expects outcomes to be super fast, right? Think about Amazon Prime. You can now get anything you want in under 2 hours. Well, mostly. You can kind of get any cab, quickly and get to a place where you want to get to and start going there in under no time. You can get any content you want, be it Netflix or Google, really, really fast. And so we kind of see that the world is evolving from what used to be, a simple era to kind of what you will call now the next level, which is a super fast instant era, right? And that's something that we believe that the IT needs to respond to as well. So what does it really mean for IT, right? It means that similarly to what you expect in your general life, more and more businesses and more end users are demanding instant outcomes. Right? So you have your end users, nobody wants to see the spinning wheel on your application. You've got business executives and they're saying, hey, how can you drive more and more applications and better applications so we can drive business revenue? Your developers don't want a modern solution where they don't want to have to kind of worry about the infrastructure at all. They just want to, develop applications and use their CI/CD pipelines to deliver them as fast as possible. And your CIO is, on the other hand, also saying, hey, what can you do? How can you move fast? How can we get, to support these business end user and developer requirements? So your goal is increasingly becoming, deliver applications and data instantly as they're required to the customer that needs them. And for that, you really need an infrastructure that enables you to run, protect, recover, migrate, and secure these applications and data across on-prem and per public cloud in the fastest possible manner. We think that if you look at the public cloud, one of the reasons why public cloud is preferred by a lot of business leaders, by a lot of CIOs, is essentially the fact that it unlocks a lot of speed in the organization. You have one console. In case of Amazon, it would be the Amazon console. And you have a set of resources like EC2 for compute, EBS for block storage, and S3 for object storage that are available to you and accessible to you in a very fast manner. So you can simply click a few buttons and scale your EC2, deploy your EC2, run it, deploy your applications on it. You can scale your EBS in a very easy way. You can scale your S3 in a very easy way. So you have this elastic compute, primary, and backup storage built into the cloud infrastructure. You have this cross-region replication that's nothing more than just a checkbox, right? You just click on that, and your data starts being replicated from an object store or to another region, and that way you kind of start having site-level resiliency. But at the same time, you also have built-in backup, right? It's no longer a separate product that you need to deploy and manage. It's nothing more than another option that you can click. And once you click that option, your data starts being staged and protected across the different tiers of storage that's available in Amazon, from EC2 to EBS, from EBS to S3. You have this automatic data lifecycle management. So what we think needs to happen is something similar is needed for the private cloud, right? How do you get this equilibrium between your public cloud, where you have instant access to the information, and your private cloud, where it's still super hard, where it still takes you a lot of time to manage? We think there are three fundamental ways to accomplish that equilibrium. One is the ability to get performance and capacity elastically and independent of each other in your on-premises data center, just like EC2, EBS, and S3. We believe that data protection should just be built in, and it should just be a matter of a policy that you can set so that your data can move from the different aspects like compute and block and object, and do it automatically on a policy basis without having to require multiple products. And lastly, we need solutions that enable frictionless data mobility across sites and recoverability in case something happens. If you had all of these three things, we believe that you could unlock, if not similar to the same degree, but very close to that, the speed that you need in your on-premises infrastructure, like you would in public cloud. But as we all know, private cloud solutions make it hard, right? You have a lot of different vendors for your primary storage. Many of them are, being using technologies that were really, sort of invented, many years ago. So they're still kind of complex. They're not really in tune with the modern era. We have kind of constructs like LUNs and so on, which you still have a separate backup, which not only is a separate tax that you have to manage, but you also have, when you need the data, it's not really that fast in terms of giving you the data you need. You have disaster recovery, which is a collection of different products that you have to, work through and manage and keep up to date all the time. And what that really means is that you can't really control the end-to-end experience or the end-to-end stack of disaster recovery, and it kind of makes disaster a bit fragile. And then you have the public cloud that you increasingly have to integrate with, and that becomes another silo and another challenge. So we empathize with the modern IT administrator, and they have to do a lot to make IT work, to make infrastructure work, and we believe that it's time to simplify. It's time to stop worrying about the infrastructure and start focusing more and more on the apps in the private cloud as well. what we believe our customers really need and what on-premises really need is what we call a self-protecting enterprise cloud. We believe that these disparate functions should actually be converged, and these disparate functions should run on one platform, just like the public cloud, to run and protect your applications end to end, all the way from getting and achieving scalable performance, achieving backups for a lot of workloads and applications, as well as instant recovery of the data when you need it for disaster recovery that is fail-proof in the sense that it's a fully integrated built-in stack where the disaster recovery software knows about the environment and knows what to do in that environment, and seamless, effortless public cloud extension where you just consume the public cloud resources without having to learn about the new environment and user interface and so on and so forth like you have to do today. So we believe that this is possible, and that's kind of what the Datrium Enterprise Cloud Platform is designed to do. And I'm not going to make it a commercial here, but I just wanted to kind of show you an example of how this is possible and how we have attempted to do that with the Datrium Enterprise Cloud Platform. So essentially, what Datrium has created is a platform that allows you on the very left with a DVX product, get elastic compute, elastic fast flash storage, and elastic object-like storage called data nodes. And you can scale them independently in your on-premises infrastructure to massive scale, consolidate multiple hypervisors on it, such as VMware, Docker, Red Hat, and really get the infrastructure that can scale as you grow, that can scale elastically, and that's super simple to manage from a primary perspective. The data nodes, having been built in, also enable you to consolidate a lot of your different data and applications from a backup perspective on the same platform. So you can get converged compute, primary, and backup. But what we have done is couple that with a certain set of data services or cloud offerings called CloudShift and Cloud DVX, which really enable you to get built-in backup to cloud and built-in DR orchestration that can help you do disaster recovery across a DVX to DVX on-prem. Say you have another second site, or from a DVX system to the public cloud where we work with VMware Cloud on AWS to do the disaster recovery. So you can basically use cloud resources only during the period of the disaster. So you don't have to use them when you're not having the disaster, which leads to transformational economics for your organization. And lastly, you can manage all of this from a single pane of glass, and data as it moves across these environments is encrypted everywhere it goes. So very simply, with a few clicks, you start having your backups, you get ridiculous amount of performance, you get built-in replication that does data transfers across different environments. You can instantly go to the cloud for backing up data. You can instantly go to the cloud for DR use cases, and data stays encrypted everywhere, and you have single pane of management. So if you had this, we believe that you can finally get close to the experience that customers get in public cloud and start focusing on their application. So how does it all work? I want to kind of spend a couple of minutes on this, and I want to kind of then hand it over to Russ in a few minutes, who is actually the star of the show, and he's going to talk about what he's seen as he's worked with the system. So I'm going to give you guys some foundation, and then we're going to jump into the Russ's section. So Datrium DVX is essentially a brand new architecture. We call it a two-layer architecture, and it's designed in a way that it enables convergence of primary and backup on the same platform from a capabilities, from an efficiency and a performance perspective. So we have what we call a performance tier, which is essentially a set of hosts. Any host, could be any server that you already have in your infrastructure. The Datrium software gets installed on that host, and it consumes any local flash that's attached to that host. So essentially, you get a software controller, and as you add more and more hosts, you get more and more software controllers, which means your performance goes up every time you add a host. And that software consumes local flash that's on those hosts to present a data store to the applications that are, or the virtual machines that are running on it. And so what it means is you have completely scalable performance, as you add more hosts, you get more and more controller power and you get more and more speed. You have complete control over the amount of flash that you can add to the system. And this is server flash, so it's dramatically cheaper than what you can buy from an array flash, for example. And because that flash is local, you get really, really low latencies. So your latencies at the application are really in the sub-millisecond range, not at the array, right? These are application latencies, which is about 10x lower than what you would see if the IO had to travel over the network. So this, because of local latencies, you get tremendous amount of performance. Since the software is installed on a host, you get VM-centric management. And because of the way we architect this, as you will see in the protection tier, we do not use the hosts for stateful data. We just use it as a fast copy. And all the data lives on what we call the protection tier. So the durability is maintained in the protection tier, which means your hosts are actually stateless. And by that, what I mean is if the host goes down or if it goes away, no data has to be rebuilt. And it's just a matter of vMotioning or failing over those VMs to another host, and they start running with the same amount of performance that they were running previously. On the protection tier, this is where your data is being persisted. Think of it like S3. And this is kind of where you have this backup copies of data which you can instantly restore and run on the host when you need it, and you get a global data reduction pool across all your data across all your hosts. So really good economics there. You can independently scale the durable capacity, just like S3, and you can independently scale the compute and the flash, just like you can with EC2 and EBS. Built-in backup and recovery features. So you have a searchable catalog. You can store millions of snapshots on this platform without any performance overhead. And you'll kind of see some proof of that in the next section with Russ. Very granular, policy driven. So all you have to do is just basically do a few clicks and set the policy at which you want to start taking these restore points. And you can do that from at a VM level. You can do that at a vDisk level. You can do that at a container level if you're running Docker containers on this platform with persistent volumes. From a restore perspective, again, super simple, very fast. You can restore at any granularity that you want from a guest file perspective, which is files within the VM, or virtual machines, vDisk, containers, so on and so forth. Very important for backup system is to have always on efficiency. So we have built this platform to have global deduplication, as well as compression and inline erasure coding, which means you don't incur a very high amount of overhead for data protection. So you can get very, very efficient, lots of capacity, which allows you to store a lot of data. Very important, we have a built-in verification for backup technology, and this runs every 4 hours in our system. So what it ensures is that any backup that has been stored on the system, no matter how old, is constantly verified for its accuracy and integrity of data all the time in the system. So you can kind of be at peace that it will restore when it needs to be restored. Some advantages compared to traditional solutions that this offers compared to what your traditional backup solutions are is instant backup of thousands of VMs. Right? This is a platform that actually allows you to not copy data from one system to another system. It's an integrated platform. You can just quickly take a snap of thousands of VMs with the same point-in-time consistency. This is really important. In traditional backup, you don't get point-in-time consistency. This system allows you to take thousands of VMs at the same point in time, which means when you restore them, they come up at the same point in time, and you don't have to worry about each of the VM being backed up at a different point in time. The speed of recovery is super fast, so it's kind of built in, it's simple, and it's super fast to recover. One system to manage, it increases your IT agility, eliminates performance impact in your environment. Typically, when you take a backup, it results either in a VMware snapshot, or it results in a huge amount of data being copied on the production system, which kind of hits performance to quite a big degree. None of that happens here. You kind of see some of that in the next section. And you really eliminate the risk of failure recovery. As we said, fully verified backup. So when you want to restore, you get the restore that you want. Ultimately, it means that you can save a lot of your CapEx and OpEx from an operational simplicity perspective, as well as from an investment that you need upfront by consolidating primary and backup on the Datrium DVX platform. Real quick, built-in replication, which is universal dedupe aware. So any data transferred between the site is only transferred in terms of its unique data. This is, again, some of the technology that was brought to the market by Data Domain. And Data Domain founders are also, the founders of Datrium. So they were able to kind of leverage that technology, which allows us to get super fast transfers as well as save customers a lot of their WAN cost. And the best part is it's built in, there are no knobs, just turn it on, start replicating, and you get this feature. From a CloudShift perspective, this is the DR orchestration product. What it really allows you to do is if a site goes down, it allows you to restart those VMs in an ordered manner with a runbook, with IP address mappings, with custom scripts running, all of that in the same platform. So you can move data to another on-prem site, or you can move data to VMware Cloud in AWS. And as you do that, what it really means is you get one console for the entire stack. So everything in this environment, all the way from the DVX to the VMware Cloud and AWS environment, can be managed from one interface, which is the vCenter. And it's delivered to you as a SaaS service. So you don't have to really worry about installing anything on your on-prem. It's just something that you can log in, enter your credential, enter your DR plans, and you're set with regards to this particular DR offering. Instant failover to prem or cloud. From a cloud perspective, what it means is that we can help you spin up the VMware Cloud SDDC on demand, which means that you only use resources, you only pay VMware for that environment during which it's running, and you don't pay for them when there is no event or after you do the failback. So you only pay them when you are actually running the environment. Again, it's operationally consistent, which means it's going from a VMware environment to a VMware environment. There's no conversion of VM. There's one UI to manage that entire environment. And again, it's fail-proof because this is where we have end-to-end visibility across both environments. This is not like something like Zerto or SRM, which are great products, just that they require they sort of depend on adapters and plugins for a variety of different products that they need to work with. This is a case where the product understands what's a snapshot, what's the VMware constructs, and it can do end-to-end plan verification on the environment so that you know that when you need it, this plan is going to run. One pane of glass. So again, everything in vCenter, a really modern UI. Again, the more important point is just like the public cloud, you have simple policies that you can set and you get converged primary, backup, disaster recovery, and public cloud leverage. So in a nutshell, what this kind of all means is that you now have hosts that can scale. And as you scale, you get performance. You have local flash that can scale. And as you scale that, you get much, much lower latency and much, much higher IOPS because it's local. You have data nodes that you can scale capacity, and that's where you store your persistent data and your backups. And so you kind of have this elastically scalable platform. And on the backup side, it's a simple policy that you can set where data can now be staged from the host to the flash tier all the way to the data nodes, and it can be replicated across the different sites. So you have simplicity there and everything managed from one console. So in a nutshell, this is kind of what we call a self-protecting enterprise cloud. Essentially the point being, why do you keep doing the things that you've been doing for a long time on-prem? It's time to focus on the applications. It's time to get infrastructure to be much, much more faster. If you are going to please, the audience and the consumers of your service, you need something that enables you to unlock the next level of speed. That's what we believe the Datrium self-protecting enterprise cloud or a platform like that enables you to do. And all the way from instant install, all the way to instant hybrid cloud on one consolidated platform. So with that, I wanted to hand it over to Russ. And Russ, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tushar. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about our company and what we do. So Evaluator Group, for those of you who don't know us, we're an IT analyst firm. We focus on data management and storage technologies. But because those technologies touch so many things, we've been sort of broadening our scope more and more into the data management side and other IT topics. And unlike some analyst firms, I mean, not disparaging any, some, different business models out there, a large portion of our work is with IT end users. So we spend a lot of time talking with IT users, trying to understand what their needs are, because that's ultimately what drives, things that are important. There's a lot of neat, cool technologies that come along all the time, but they don't all necessarily have implications in the real world. So we think it's very important to focus on, what's usable in the real world. And there we go. Okay. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what it is that we tested. So we actually got 2 systems in from Datrium, had them in our lab running for about 6 months, and also had Cloud DVX set up for a good portion of that time as well. So, this was something that we spent quite a bit of time with, a lot of hands-on time using the system, becoming familiar with it, which is nice because then when we talk about it, we can talk about our experience, not just, some marketing slides that were handed to us. No offense to any marketing people. I did that role too. But real world experience is always much more valuable. And so what we focused on, and Tushar talked about a lot of different topics here. He talked about some of the new technology that they have coming out, CloudShift. That technology was not available when we did our testing. So our testing was focused on Cloud DVX and sort of different use cases. CloudShift is more about disaster recovery, whereas Cloud DVX, the thing I'm going to talk about mostly, is really focused on data protection, right? Making backup copies, keeping them safe, moving them to different sites and recovering from them. So that's primarily what we tested is Cloud DVX, and also obviously DVX system. And then we also, did some other usability features, right? Just how easy is it to use the system? So that's always an important aspect. Okay, now for those of you, this is a little bit hard to see. Unfortunately, couldn't make it any bigger and get the full screen in here. But this is essentially the dashboard that you see if you have a Datrium DVX system. And the reason I put it in here is because in my experience, and I've used a lot of different storage systems, I would say a vast majority of storage systems over the past 10 years, I've had some time using them either remotely or in our lab, hands-on for a while. And this user interface is probably one of the nicest I've seen in a long, long time. It's very easy to use. I like it. One thing that's wonderful about it is that you get essentially the same user interface regardless if you go directly to the system itself. So this URL is pointing directly to the data node. But also you would see the same thing as a plugin. And here's the beauty of it. Not only does it work as a plugin in the HTML5 version of vCenter, but it works identically in the Flash version of vCenter. And like many of you, if you use vCenter, I end up having both versions up because the HTML5 version is faster, but it's a little more buggy and there's not fully featured. Flash version, you have to go to just because it's more familiar and you have all the features there. So the great thing about this is you get the identical user interface regardless if it's running as a plugin in the Flash HTML5 version or directly to the data node. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the cloud uses of data protection. And we looked in a hybrid cloud environment. So we do several surveys every year. And we did this survey about 6 months ago, and we talked to, I believe it was around 250 IT users. And these were all companies of 1,000 people or larger. And we asked them, how do you use hybrid cloud storage? And there are a number of different ways that they could answer. But you can see there that the top use case was backup and disaster recovery. And data protection and data archiving were also high use cases. People could answer more than one. But so you see that data protection continues to be one of the primary use cases for the cloud, and for good reason, along with disaster recovery. So a simplistic overview of our test environment. Like I said, we had 2 Datrium DVX systems in our lab. They were able to replicate to each other. And then we also had a link up to a Cloud DVX instance, which was running in Amazon AWS. Now we had what I would call a good uplink to Amazon AWS. It wasn't a great one, but it was better than just a lower end business link. We had a 100 megabit per second bidirectional link. So in other words, we had 100 megabit up and 100 megabit down. So the uplink is important when you're replicating to the cloud. and with some, plans, you get charged extra for symmetrical access. But anyway, so we had what I would consider a good business grade, but certainly, not super high speed. Other people out there, I know some of you have gigabit and multi-gigabit links into the cloud. We did not have that, but we were still able to effectively replicate. So, now, another thing, and again, this isn't strictly part of the testing, but it is in a way in that obviously to use the system you have to set it up. And Tushar talked about, oh, it's real simple to add. In fact, that almost glosses over it. It's incredibly simple to add additional nodes to the data node. So essentially, once you've installed the data node, there's a plugin into vCenter, and once you have that plugin, you just go to the host, say that you want to add it as an HCI node, and it's essentially 3 steps, right? So the first thing that comes up is, okay, which hosts? That's the dialog box number 1 there. I have all these hosts that are possible. Which host do I want to add? Select those. Next, it says, okay, I see these hosts. Now, which SSD devices do you want to use for caching locally? And then you select those, and then essentially you're done. It's, a couple steps. It's literally like 3 or 4 clicks. Well, a couple to select the checkboxes, right? So a couple extra clicks in there, but not much. It's pretty simple, definitely less than 5 minutes to set up an extra node. And also similarly, setting up Cloud DVX was very simple. I did it a couple times. Now, this example does not show me entering the credentials. Excuse me, had a little bit of a cold, so I had to cough there. So it did not show me entering the credentials because I'd entered those previously. So it remembered the credentials. So this was actually the second time I'd set up the Cloud DVX. And Tushar can probably give a little bit more details, but I don't remember exactly where it is that you enter the AWS credentials. But once your credentials are in there, essentially your keys, your secret keys for your account and your account information. Once you've entered that information, it literally is just 3 steps to set up Cloud DVX. You just say that you want to set up a replication. You want it to be an AWS Cloud DVX instance. It goes out and sets up all of the things on the back end, and then you're done. And it looks essentially and acts essentially just like another local DVX instance that you can replicate to and from. So very simple to set up, very quick and easy. And in fact, for those of you who've used AWS, people talk about how simple and wonderful the cloud is and how simple it is to use. For those of you who've used it a bit, no, that's not at all true. AWS is very complex. They've got their own lingo and terms for everything, over 200 services. I guess if you're in it all day, every day, developing in it, it's not too hard to use, but it can be overwhelming at first. It's not simple the first time you get into AWS. There's a million options, but setting up Cloud DVX was the easiest interaction I've ever had with AWS. So that was very nice. All right. And then once you've set that up, then like I said, you can interact with the DVX system, the Cloud DVX system, just as if it was local. So what you see here is you have, it's a little hard to read, but down at the bottom of the screen, you can see that there's an EG2 pointing to AWS Cloud, and you can see an EG1 pointing to EG2. So up in the right-hand corner, you'll see that there's, this system is EG2. So this was essentially the second DVX system I had set up, right? Just called it EG for Evaluator Group 2. So what we have is we have, the other system is replicating here. So EG1 is replicating to EG2. And you can see that this system, EG2, is replicating to AWS Cloud. Now, EG1 can also replicate directly to the cloud. It doesn't have to go through EG2. So you can set up your replication however you want. And here, I just had 2 simple protection groups set up. One I called SQL for a SQL Server VM, and another I had a file server with several snapshots. So these are just some of the protection groups I have, and then you can see the replica sites. Now, again, so I had 2 systems, EG1, you can see that there, and EG2, system 2. And this is just another screenshot I had, when I was preparing this presentation, I had to go through all my screenshots. I had over 500 screenshots from the testing that I did. So selecting the most relevant ones was a little bit of a challenge because I had so many good ones. And again, I can provide people higher res versions of this, but probably better, you can probably just get a demo from somebody at Datrium and see this for yourself. But what you end up with in the protection area, so you can see, in this console, you have a number of different areas, and one area is focused on protection. Again, self-protecting storage is a really important concept, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But so in this protection area, you have different protection categories or groups of VMs that you can create and put together, and then you can protect them as a group. So that's one thing that differentiates, a system designated as self-protecting storage from just a simple system that can do snapshots, right? Snapshots is a good start, but that in itself is by no means a data protection system, right? There's a lot of requirements for data protection, right? So you have, and Tushar touched on a couple of them, you have to have a catalog, right? You have to have a way to set up policies and manage those policies, right? And obviously, just having a local copy on the primary system of data, a local snapshot, is not a backup, right? Absolutely has to be on a secondary system, and ideally 2 or 3 other systems, right? Different locations for DR purposes. So those are some of the features that really make a truly self-protecting storage system, right? And Datrium with the DVX and Cloud DVX provide many of those, so that's nice. But again, on this protection area, you can see that we have different groups of VMs and they have different protection policies. And I'll go a little bit here. When you're setting up the protection policy, you can create schedules. And again, I really like this user interface. It's very simple. I did open the manual one time, like most people. Rarely read it, right? Only when you're trying to figure something out. There's one thing that I couldn't quite figure out how to do, so I actually did pop open the manual and read part of it at one time, but virtually everything else I just figured out through trial and error, just using the system, because it was very intuitive. So creating the protection schedules, there's almost an unlimited number of options. As you see there, you can just add additional snapshots and policies for when they're taken. So you can select how often, hourly, daily, right? Where they go to, you can select the secondary system or Cloud DVX, weekly, and you don't have to just select one. So I can say, I want to select both the Cloud DVX and the secondary system, right? For this part of it, right? So very simple to manage the policies. And that's very important as part of a true self-protecting storage system, right? Much more than just you can do local snapshots. Now, recovery, the whole reason we do backup, right, is because inevitably you have to recover something. And like many people, especially if you haven't read the manual, or let's say you're a smaller shop and this is only one of 10, 15 systems you use, and things are going great and you don't have to touch it that often, that's wonderful. You maybe monitor it once a week just to make sure everything's good. Then you get the semi-disaster of something went wrong, something died, something's missing, a VM got deleted, you have to recover it. So that's the time when you really want simple to use, and you don't want to have to read the manual, right? You don't want to have to spend hours just figuring out how to recover something, right? So simple and easy to use is very important. And again, so just from the console, you can see a list of your data protection points. Again, a little hard to read on this small screen, but you have a list of all the data protection points, and you can see where they exist, whether they're local or remote, right? So let's say you didn't have the copy you wanted to recover from didn't exist locally for some reason, right? Maybe it expired and you have more versions in the cloud, which is fairly common, right? That you'd have more versions in the cloud. Now, as we all know, typically you want to recover the last known good version. So most likely it's going to either be on the local or the secondary system on site. But let's say you lost something and you need to recover a VM from 2 months ago, right? And it only exists in the cloud. Well, it's essentially the same recovery process as doing it locally. The only difference is you just start by selecting the remote snapshot, and then you say replicate, right? Now, the replication time is obviously dependent upon the amount of data being transferred. So it calculates, the difference in the data sets between what the snapshot exists in AWS Cloud and the local instance of the VM. And then it replicates it locally. So you have to wait for that process. And again, that's, link dependent, amount of data dependent. But then once it's local, then the step 4 is you just select that now local snapshot and you just say restore, right? And it's essentially like doing a vMotion of a VM. The VM becomes, you spin up that VM from that image and it's back in vCenter. So very simple to use, which again, I stress is very important when you're under pressure of restoring something critically. And again, you have a lot of restore options. Hard to show them all here, but again, you can hopefully read this. Once you've selected a snapshot, so this is a snapshot set, right? A group of VMs that I had. So I was protecting 10 different Windows VMs, right? All with the same policy. So now I can select that snapshot set and it says, okay, now here's all your virtual machines. Okay, so I can select, say, a specific virtual machine, and from that, I have a number of options. I can clone that VM from a snapshot. Sometimes that's nice. You don't want to delete the existing VM for some reason. You want to make a clone of it. You can just do a restore if you know that's what you want to do. You can replicate it to another, data node, or you can mount the VM's virtual disks to an existing VM. So sometimes that's nice, especially for file system data, right? Sometimes you might just want to browse it from another VM. So you have a lot of options for restoration, which again, very important part of being a true self-protecting storage system. So just to review some of the things that we tested. So we tested protecting multiple VMs to the local DVX system. We tested protection multiple VMs both to the local and to the cloud DVX. And then we also looked, I haven't mentioned this yet, the performance impact of data protection. So spent a bit of time looking at, are there any performance implications for taking the snapshots and replicating them? Because again, as we all know, a traditional backup, typically there's some performance impact when you take that backup copy, right? Because you have to read all that data. It's one of the reasons backups have traditionally been done overnight and, on weekends, but for a lot of people, there are no overnight or weekend periods, right? Everything's 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, essentially. So being able to do that without performance impact is very important. And that's another reason why snapshots have become the de facto way to at least create the initial point in time copy of data from where you create the backup copy from. So we measured it and we saw absolutely no performance impact during either the snapshots, and this is regardless of the number of snapshots you had. Again, another important factor, if you use some hypervisor-based snapshots, I won't mention any vendor in particular, but a lot of them have performance implications as you get a greater number of snapshots, right? First snapshot, a little bit. Second snapshot, more performance impact. More data that you're using on the disk, right? You get all these big extra VMDK files, for example. And then by the time you get to the 10th snapshot, your performance is way down. And they basically recommend don't do 10 snapshots, right? 1 or 2, delete them when you're done, right? With Datrium, there was no performance impact. I think I tested up to 35. It's in the paper. Can't remember offhand, but saw no performance impact for the 30th, 35th versus the first. So that's very nice. And again, having a lot of data recovery options, very important for on-premise and also from the cloud. So those are just some of the features that we looked at. Talk a little bit about self-protecting storage. This is probably as good a time as any. And self-protecting storage is an important concept that a lot of vendors are either beginning to talk about or beginning to think about or beginning to implement some features to address the need, right? And I certainly won't say, because having been in IT myself for quite a long time, and like most IT people, you get to start doing backups, right? So I remember in the very late 80s when we had the 9-track tapes, changing out those wonderful tapes for backups. It's a fun job. and that's where all entry-level IT people seem to start. And right, backup's just no fun, but it's very important, right? And just, I wouldn't suggest, it really depends on the company's needs, that, self-protecting storage is the answer for all data protection. For some, companies, it could be the vast majority of your data protection needs if you have the right self-protecting storage system. For other companies, I would suggest it's probably just a nice add-on, right? It's another way to have some protection points that could give you some important recovery options. So I wouldn't suggest that this is the answer for all your data protection needs, but it certainly can meet the needs, quite a few needs for quite a few people, I would say. So I would say it's definitely worth investigating the specific features. If you're considering Datrium, investigate the specific capabilities of the self-protection capabilities of DVX, along with Cloud DVX. And then the new feature, which I have not yet tested, would love to test it in the near future, is Cloud Shift, which is the new capability that Datrium has just brought out, which again really addresses the DR need to spin up a VM in the cloud, right? Instead of having to bring that snapshot back, what it does is you just spin up that snapshot in the cloud, right? And that could be an important option for a lot of people. So self-protecting storage, great concept. Some of the things that we found during testing, like I stressed, the user interface I really liked a lot. They never asked me to say that. I just say it because I really like it. I've used a lot of user interfaces. There's a lot of really bad ones out there. There's quite a few okay ones out there. This is one of the best I've seen in a long time. Setup is easy to use. It's the same interface regardless if you access it directly or through a vCenter. Right, the data protection policies are integrated throughout the UI. There's not just one place where you can see things. You can see the policies in several different places. When you click on a VM, you can see that it has protection policies associated with it and has a number of snapshots. That's nice. And again, the recovery options are great to have as well, because again, when you're under pressure, have to do something fast, don't have time for the manual, you really need to have flexibility in how you recover and restore that data, because it's all, based on that particular disaster, what's going to be the best way to recover that data. And again, the monitoring and the insight available through the user interface, very nice as well. So just to wrap it up, again, can't stress enough, I really like the UI. I think I said that. The vCenter integration, I said this in the paper, was the best that I've ever seen, and I was especially struck by the fact that, again, it's the same user interface regardless of HTML5 or Flash. For those of you who use vCenter, there's quite a big difference between those user interfaces, and unfortunately for a lot of companies, vCenter told people to develop with one API, and then they switched user interfaces on them. And a lot of vendors are, struggling to now switch gears and use yet another API to redevelop all their plugins with. But somehow Datrium did it in a way that it works in both. So that's nice from a user perspective. The snapshot recovery, like I said, an idea of self-protecting storage. What makes it self-protecting is the ability to replicate and have policies and have a catalog, right? So otherwise it's just snapshots. But what makes it truly self-protecting storage is the ability to have policies that replicate that to known locations and have a catalog to browse those, and then a way to quickly recover them. So I think this can probably meet the needs of a lot of people for data protection. Again, I wouldn't suggest it's the answer for all data protection, but it can certainly supplement a lot of data protection needs. And with that, I hand it back to David and Tushar.
Awesome. Thanks, Russ. And no, I think I'm in complete agreement with you that this is not the all for data protection, but I think you kind of went through it in a good amount of detail, and absolutely. For virtual machines, and for a lot of, if nothing, it kind of reduces the requirement for a separate data protection. It kind of augments it by having a much faster tier of backup and restore capabilities. So thanks for that, Russ. That was really great. I did want to kind of get your comments on this one. So guys, we've kind of focused on backup quite a bit in this presentation, but I don't want it to be lost on anyone that this is also a really high performance platform. And this is one benchmark, IOMARK specifically, that interestingly Russ was also a part of. I think from an evaluator and from a approver perspective, that this was all done in the right spirit. But I kind of want to cover the high points, and I'm going to hand it over to Russ real quick for this. So this was a benchmark that we did for DVX. So as you guys may recall in the earlier slides, the system can scale to actually 128 compute nodes, although in this benchmark we may have used somewhere around 60. And we had up to 10 data nodes, so you kind of can get about more than close to 2 petabytes of effective capacity in a scale-out fashion. We did this benchmark, with our partner Dell, and the interesting bit for me was that this took us about 1 day to set up this infrastructure. And this is really kind of a testimony to Russ's earlier slides about how easy it is to add a host, kind of under 10 minutes or so on. So I think one guy set this up in 1 day. All features that we have in the product, we don't have any knobs. We want it to be, sort of just, we want features to just work. And so deduplication, compression, erasure coding, encryption, everything was turned on. And in my opinion, this is the largest, I think if I'm not wrong, Russ, this is the largest IOMARK benchmark, 10x higher than, an SCI, 5x larger than an AFA. And even at that scale, you can see that the system performed with 1/3 lower latency than at the application than, what you kind of saw with some of the other solutions out there. So Russ, any comment on this?
Yeah, so I was definitely involved with this process. Being the creator of IOMARK, so our company Evaluator Group created IOMARK suite of benchmarks. We have a couple of different workloads, and this workload was the IOMARK VM workload, which essentially is the VMmark 2.5 storage workload. So if anybody's familiar with VMmark, this is the storage portion of the VMmark 2.5 workload. So it runs the exact same workload that runs from a storage perspective. And, storage has been the bottleneck for a lot of scaling for quite a long time. All Flash is certainly helping with that. And, the scale out capability really helped. And again, so the 10x, that's because, they have 10 nodes, right? So that helped get to that 10x higher. And scale out is really important, in larger enterprises, being able to manage scale and app performance. And another thing I'd say is that this benchmark wasn't picked because they would do awesome on it, right? So some people have, storage systems have, let's say, really good write latency, right? Super low. So they'll pick benchmarks that have, 100% write, right? Or some people have, super low reads, but their writes aren't very good. So maybe they'll just do small blocks. So they'll pick like a 4K 100% read. Well, that's wonderful in the benchmark, but that's not real world. That's the difference with IOMARK VM. It uses real world applications, right, as the basis for the IOs. And I will tell you that this benchmark actually is not super kind to Datrium's architecture, because Datrium does better with reads. Everybody does better with something, right? So because of their architecture, they cache reads. So they do better with reads. This benchmark is fairly write heavy. This is close to 50-50 reads versus writes, and larger block sizes as well, right? So this benchmark was not picked because their architecture happens to make them look good. This is a real world benchmark, and they got the best results on it because they're able to scale. So I think that's very important.
Great. Thanks, Russ. So what I kind of want to do real quick in the next couple of minutes is, so let me kind of, bring it home, right? So, ultimately, I'm sure Russ and I and everybody at Datrium kind of empathizes with, the IT administration on the on-prem side. We think that it should be a lot simpler to scale performance, should be a lot simpler to, backup and restore, must be much faster, should be able to sort of have much more reliable DR, and should have end-to-end security. So hopefully you've kind of seen that, you can start to get elements of that in one solution, and really sort of reduce the amount of complexity and reduce the amount of time that you have to spend on your on-premises infrastructure. Most of the customers that we hear about and talk to, you'll see that some snippets in a second, basically say, we set it up once and we've not even had to think about it since then. And I think that's exactly what we are trying to do, is to reduce the complexity, simplify life for the IT administrators, and make sure that they can focus on driving more and more business value, right? So from a use cases perspective, it's really, multi-hypervisor and containers. So, and you can kind of run them in the same platform. Gives you the ability to run a variety of workloads on the same platform without performance implications. App consolidation, we actually see a lot of our attach rate with heavy databases and ERP solutions. So that's a good solution for those kinds of applications. And it's also a great fit for modern applications where, because of the scale out architecture, because of the ability to do very granular backup and restore, you can really enable and unlock your CI/CD pipelines where you can clone something instead of having to copy it again and again and again. So it kind of unlocks a lot of the speed and agility for modern applications, and all of which can be consolidated on a few platforms, which really help you simplify your IT environment. Another study that we've done with IDC, this is again based on an interview for our customers, really dramatic results, right? 617% 3-year ROI. So kind of literally pays for itself in about 5 months. Really simple to use and simple, great sort of economic returns as well, and 54% TCO savings, 73,000 of productivity gain per 100 users, and so on and so forth. So good, sort of for you to take back to your, to your leadership, tell them about the platform, and kind of tell them that the economic gains as well as the productivity gains are going to be phenomenal. Quick sample across our customers. So across Siemens, Xeon, University of Maryland, there are a lot more names, but I think the main thing that I want to focus on is everybody that we speak with says that they got dramatic performance improvement, which is really baseline for us. We want that to happen for sure. But equally importantly, a lot of them said that they were able to recover their data much, much faster. And this kind of goes back to the concept of self-protection. Also, a lot of them said they really spend zero time managing their infrastructure. So especially from a storage primary backup perspective. So, much more simplicity. And again, this is another piece of validation, really important. Gartner Peer Insights. This is a tool that's available to anybody. You can just go to Google and type Peer Insights Datrium. And this is 70 reviews from our existing customers. 5 out of 5. It's sort of 4.99 if I'm not wrong. But dramatic feedback. This is the highest rated solution in its category out there from a Gartner Peer Insights perspective. So happy customers, great feedback, and we have a lot more that we're working on to deliver to make sure that the infrastructure becomes as simple as possible and helps you be ready for that instant economy and have the ability to serve your end users, your business leaders, your developers on one platform with unprecedented speed. So I believe that's all we have. So I'm going to hand it back to David.
Yeah, great presentation, Russ and Tushar. We do have a $300 Amazon gift card to give away right now to one lucky winner on the event today. That is Mr. Josh Griffith of Arizona. Congratulations to Josh. And with that, we just have time for a few questions on today's event. If you have a question, now's the time to get it in. Let's see here. First question is for you, Tushar. I think, Datrium's DVX solution is so unique. There's a little bit of confusion around exactly how it fits in. Is it a HCI solution? Is it hardware or software? Is it a data protection solution? How do you answer those types of questions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, frankly, when you do so many of the functionalities that are previously provided by, different systems, it kind of becomes hard to, kind of categorize it. We actually like to call it a self-protecting enterprise cloud platform, but essentially, there's definitely an element of hyperconvergence in the solution because we do deploy software on the hosts and we leverage the local flash to provide you with all the performance and performance scale out abilities. But it also, leverages concepts from arrays in the sense that it has the data nodes, which are very similar to arrays. And we like the idea that in arrays, your hosts are stateless. And similar to that, in our architecture, the data is being persisted on the data nodes, which are dual controller, fully redundant, scale out solution. So, if I were to take a guess, it's closer to HCI from a from a value perspective. It's a lot more simpler, it's a lot more scale out, but it kind of mitigates some of the side effects of using hosts for data persistent, because every time you have a host maintenance event, you now have your data rebuild occurring at the same time. We don't have that. So kind of get the values from an HCI and kind of HCI plus, because we kind of gone ahead and gone beyond compute and storage and started to look at DR and backup and hybrid cloud intrinsically into the platform.
Okay, very nice. And then a question here for Russ. Based on what you learned in your research, can the Datrium DVX solution be, a single system with built-in data protection? Meaning, do you still need an external data protection solution?
Well, it gets down to need, right? So here's what I would do. I would use Datrium as my primary method of protecting data, but I would probably still have another backup method, right? I would probably still have, I don't know, Veeam if I was heavily virtualized, right? I've used Veeam. It's really easy to use in a virtual environment, or something else, NBU or whatever, right? I would probably still have a more traditional backup application, just for longevity of management of data protection points and so on. But probably most likely the vast majority of my recoveries would, I think, most likely come from either the secondary DVX I had on site or a cloud DVX. So that's personally how I would do it. I don't think I would make it my only one today. You know what I mean? It's always nice to have a few options, but if I had to choose between just having one, that's probably one of my top choices for a single data protection solution.
Okay, very nice. All right, well, there's a few more questions still remaining, but I think that's all the time we have in today's event. So with that, I want to remind everyone to make sure you download the full evaluator group report that's available there in the handouts panel, and make sure you visit datrium.com for more information on the Datrium DVX solution. Also follow Datrium on Twitter. Thank you, Tushar, for being on the event today, and thank you, Russ, for joining us.
Thanks, Saurabh.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining today's webinar. Hope to see you on the next event. Have a great day.